Hello, and welcome to the Coach's Corner, brought to you by the Endurance Lab, where you can join the coaches live and unscripted as we recap the week and answer your questions from the forum. My name's Jason Flores, one of your Endurance Lab coaches, and today I'm joined by coaches Taya Friedstead and Ian Murray today. I think Coach Mitch is on his way, but he's probably grabbing a cup of coffee, so he'll probably join us shortly. Good morning, guys.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. It is early over here on the West Coast. So we're trying a new time today. Hopefully you don't feel the difference, but hey, we are here and we are ready to go. One quick reminder is that we are live on several different platforms today. So what you see and what you hear today is raw and unedited commentary from our coaches. This also gives you a chance to be part of the show by asking your questions. So jump on live and be part of the show. We're going to jump right into our notes here, and we're going to go to our roundtable. And Taya, why don't you go ahead and introduce our roundtable for today?
Sure. So if you're listening to this podcast in the beginning of the year, this is, January or February type, and this is winter for you, then you might have heard of base training. And so we wanted to introduce the idea of the off-season and base training, which is so widely talked about in cycling and triathlon, but really bring that in and explain why you should think of it differently. And most importantly, why base training, if you're an amateur cyclist, might not be the best training plan or approach for you. So what is base training? Base training typically is the long, moderate intensity rides that the premise is that you use those rides to increase capillary density and mitochondrial density, which basically means processing more fat and carbohydrate per minute and being able to go long at a steady, not a steady, but at a low intensity pace, but for a long, long, long time. And so if you have been training for a little while, then you probably already have this base and you already have built this into your muscles and your cells and your mitochondria and everything, your capillary density, it's already there. And so the old view of periodization is that base training should come first. So let's say you're starting your year, it's off season, you do a lot of base miles to prepare you for later on doing more intensity. When in reality, that view has been superseded. And even if you pick up, Joe Friel's training Bible, when he talks about periodization, he's also having a different view of this in light of research and science. So at the end, what you should be thinking about as an amateur cyclist is your body can improve performance with a mix of intensities. So you don't need, if you already have some base, you don't need to be doing long, steady, moderate rides at this time of the year. Mix it up is the recommendation. And why is that? So one thing to consider is time constraints. Chances are you have an X number of hours to train every week. And this is not going to change or increase because it's January or February. You still have your job, you still have your family, you still have things to do. So if you have, let's say, 8 hours a week to train, you're still going to have those 8 hours. If you switch your training from high intensity to only steady, low intensity, moderate intensity rides, what's happening now is you're decreasing your training load effectively, even though you have the same number of hours because you're going easier. Now you're bringing your training backwards. You're not progressing. So I'll stop here and see if the other coaches have any other comments at this point.
Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, so I agree with Taya. From the beginning, if you're a first year cyclist, or if you're within your first 2 years, probably I would argue is when consider as far as building some more base because you just don't have the miles in your legs.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the reasons why you look and you don't see any 20 and 21-year-old Tour de France winners. If you look at the Olympics, you see a lot of 21, 22, 25-year-old sprinters and things like that. But as you go into longer distances, you're not going to see those young athletes doing as well because they don't have the miles built up in their body. Now, for those people who are aspiring pros and they're 37 years old and they're just starting their bike training, you're gonna have to rewind the clock a little bit because it's just not gonna happen. To be honest with you,
Right.
so you don't need to go out and do 6, 7, 8 hour rides. But you do need to get out there and do those 2 hour rides at an endurance pace until your body can handle that load. And what I mean by that is a lot of people, they go and they go, oh, okay, I'm going to go do an endurance ride. And they're riding 45 minutes and it's at, 60% of their threshold. And they're like, it was awesome. We did an hour or 45 minutes, something like that. If you're going to do an hour, that's not really endurance for cycling, so to speak. You may need to back down the effort to go 2 hours or 3 hours. And that's okay because you're teaching your muscles to deal with it, and you have to overcome that muscle fatigue that is actually going to occur well before you tax your aerobic system.
Mm-hmm.
So that there's that difference, which is necessary for a new cyclist, a new runner, a new triathlete, vice what is commonly referred to as our base training, where you're going to see the top elite level riders go out and do 6 hours at a conversational pace or 7 hours at a conversational pace. Why? Well, if you haven't heard of the Spring Classics, those guys race 200, like Milan San Remo, I think is 250 or 280 kilometers. Yeah. And then at the end of it, what's even worse, it's like 100 kilometers of fairly easy, 100 kilometers of rolling, and then 80 kilometers of real steep pitches and attacks, and it's crazy town, and then a sprint at the end. So, those guys have to be able to have that muscular endurance, that must not let their legs fatigue to be able to sprint and work hard at the end. We don't have that because even if you're a new racer, a Cat 4 or 5, or even a 3, because you're coming from a rowing background or whatever, a Cat 3 race is only going to be around 80 miles. Fatigue. Okay, well, yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, that's exactly the point. So it's really, and that goes along the same lines off season for amateur cyclists. You're not training, you're not racing like the pros during the season, such that you really need an off season. So you don't want to lose all of those gains that you built. And so with that, you might use blocks. So the only time for you as an amateur cyclist that long rides and volume is going to be beneficial is if you go way above what you're used to. So let's say you do 2 to 3 camps a year, but you spread them out, right? So let's say that you do a 5-day camp and you go and you do 500 miles, whatever it is, that's good. But taking 2 months to be doing long, easy miles is not a good idea. It's just not going to benefit you.
Unless you switch from being a crit racer to doing Grand Fondos that are 100-mile plus, or ultra endurance cycling, long course triathlon, things like that, where you're going to have to do that 4 or 5 hours of effort. But that's what 2% or less of riders.
And then again, you're going to still be going backwards though, because you're not doing high intensity in the meantime. So
you always have to include some high intensity.
Right. So, and the research shows that working at the highest end of intensity spectrum can provide or improve performance at all the zones below it. So you get more benefit for your training that way.
Right. So sorry, Jason, one of the things too to throw in on this isn't just for cyclists. So I will tell you for running too, it is actually important. So even if you're a long distance runner, an ultra runner, you're going to have the need to put some intensity in there. Now, it's different if you're running 1,500 mile races. You're going to have to put a lot more volume in. But what I like to do with a couple athletes I have that are ultra runners is periodically throw in those higher intensity sessions. Because one, there are a couple studies that show that those high intensity sessions actually kind of clear out the crap that's in the legs from the endurance. And two, if you just run slow and long all the time, guess what you become?
Slow
runner. And there is a trade-off too. So when you're looking at running, if you're going to be running distance, if you want to focus on the marathon and beyond, guess what? Your mile time, your 5K time is probably going to suffer. Why? Right. Because we do need to work on longer intervals, mile intervals, 2 mile intervals, things like that. Vice, if you're going to be doing 5K specialist, I'm going to probably put you doing 200s and 400s all day long on your speed workouts. But that doesn't necessarily work for everything on the long distance running. But you can't just go long and slow. It just doesn't work.
Right. There's a really interesting, I don't know if you ever read it, Ian, there's an interesting book called Run Less, Run Faster. So I fouled that one year. That was the year I ended up with 3 stress fractures. And I'm not saying there's
Right.
there's necessarily a correlation that's direct there. But I think like even more so what you were saying when I jumped in, I apologize for being late, that like a younger cyclist needs some of those base miles. A newer runner can't jump into the intensity because the legs and the ligature and the musculature isn't ready at all for that pounding, especially if they have never been running.
Right.
So I would say, in conclusion here, when we talk about base training for amateur cyclists, your best investment during this time of the year is intervals at lactate threshold. And I'm talking lactate threshold as a way of, you can use it at FTP, but they should be fairly close, and VO2. And the long rides you might use for training other things. For example, training your nutrition for that period of time, right? And some cadence. Of cadence and some of those other things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing too is on the running side of the house. When you're doing these kind of things where you're inputting the intensity, and this is the most common mistake of all runners, is we do everything hard. And I still always go back to Miranda Carfrae, who's probably one of the best Ironman runners in history. When it's not an intensity session, it's stupid easy. So if you're going to be running a longer, easier recovery type run, it's stupid easy. It's conversational pace.
Yeah.
If it's supposed to be easy, it's easy. And that's what Mitch was alluding to as far as the building up that impact and the strengthening ligature and the muscles. You have to take those easy days easy. You have to take them like that so you can build up that resistance to impact that you don't get when you're doing 2 miles of interval training.
I mean, I like to think the other day I was running, and I've been focusing really on easy right now because I'm trying to get my running legs back. And I was on the treadmill and I was watching a show, and I completely lost sense of the fact I was running. And now part of it's that runner zone, but the other part is that I was running at an easy pace where I didn't have to really concentrate and think about the turnover and think about the next step and the effort I was putting in.
I guess a part of this conversation, let me just throw it in there, for those riders that are maybe taking some time to build strength in, or to work on maybe they're in a place where they can't do a lot of cycling and that sort of thing. For those athletes, are we suggesting that they continue intensity or find a way to do like indoor training at that point? Or I'm just talking about in the cross training sense where someone may not be able to do as much intensity during this part, or maybe they're working on something else. What do we have for them as far as advice? We lose audio there.
Yeah. So we lost Taya. No, so I think it goes back to what Taya had talked about before, is your time. So if you have 8 hours, you have 8 hours. Right. But if your time gets crunched and you only have 4 hours for this period, then you're probably not going to want to spend 3 of your 4 hours doing a long, slow ride, right? Right. What you're going to want to do is throw a little bit of intensity in there. You can do shorter part of intensity, but make it a lot less rest, and then close it out with an endurance pace type ride to help kind of build some of that endurance capacity. So you have to balance it out based on how much time you have. So if you only have 4 hours, you can't just do 4 hours of VO2 back to back to back to back to back, because then you're just crushing your system and you're not developing the full capacity that you have.
Right. But I see if you go to a lot of the forums out there that have cycling discussions, and I'm not talking about those Facebook pages, right? I'm talking about forums outside of that. You would be surprised how many people are signing up for long events, let's say mid-year, and they say, okay, I need to build up to that, so I'm just going to be increasing the time that I spend in the saddle. And that's not a training plan. That's really not, if all you're going to do is ride long and at a moderate to low intensity, when the time comes for that event, you're going to suffer quite a bit. Because you need the other things in there.
I think a lot of that comes from the kind of the mental build of, can I even finish that? So often, you're in conversation socially like, oh, I'm going to run a half marathon, a marathon. And then you'll ask them, have you ever done that before? And so people are like, oh, I feel like I need to mentally be able to go some amount of distance of that time to be able to say, hey, I can do it on that day. When in fact, science and we wouldn't have, most people do marathons week after week so that they could feel mentally that they can do it, right? So
I mean, it's so at dinner on Saturday, one of the guys that was there is thinking about joining us on the Barry-Roubaix. He's never done anything like this. He's looking at going out and buying a gravel bike. He mountain bikes, so he mountain bikes on trails. He lifts. He's in shape. But I was having this discussion with my wife. I mean, he's not really a cyclist. I mean, and I'm hoping to talk to him a little bit, and I'm just becoming friends with the guy. And see where we can kind of mold this, because he's like, well, I jumped on a recumbent bike and I pedaled for like 45 minutes and I was exhausted. And I was like, all right, well. So I mean, it's exactly what you're saying, Jason. I mean, it's you think you can just jump in and do it, and it's it's a 62-mile, I'll call it a slog, right? I mean, you've done it before, I think, Taya. So I mean, it's dirt and gravel and some pretty good hills, and it's not an easy 62 miles. It's not like pancake flat and concrete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I saw somebody in the forum yesterday saying that they commute. That's the extent of their riding experience, and they signed up for Dirty Kansas 200.
Oh my god,
it's a long commute.
Yeah, it depends. Are they commuting from Oklahoma? Or?
I'm not kidding.
That's nuts. That's nuts. You're like, oh, I think I could do it. I think I could do it. And it's funny. You hear these conversations of people doing like these grandeur things, and a lot of times people just, they come through the line, and or afterwards you circle back and you see them again. You're like, how did you do? And there's really not a conversation about just like, oh, I finished. I came across the finish line. But then I guess it depends. But the people that we're talking to are those riders that are looking to, make moves when you're out there, looking to improve your times. You're looking at time-based things. You're looking at having goals out there, not just purely finishing.
But some people, that is the goal, though.
You're right. You're right. And that's a part of the conversation.
For a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to qualify that, though, Mitch, because look, if you're doing a 100-mile run, your goal is finishing, right?
Yes.
If you're doing 50 miles, your goal is finishing, right? You start getting below 50K in a run, or even an Ironman triathlon, your goal shouldn't be just finishing. If you're not, because I try to lump people into a couple different categories. You have the pointy edge of the spear, those who are competing, right?
Right.
Like competing. And then you have the self-competers. They're competing against their self, maybe a friend, something like that.
I like that.
And then you have those people who their goal is finishing. But what I always try to do is let's reshape that goal. It's not finishing, it's finishing strong. Because if you're not at the pointy edge of the spear, you shouldn't be drained and dead at the end of the race.
I agree. That's a great way to think about it.
And so when you start looking at these people who are just coming in to do these races, I think it's great if they have their goal of finishing. I just try to pivot them to, I would like to see someone who's not at the pointy edge of the spear and who's not racing someone come across the finish line and throw their arms up and jump and smile, and then the next day be able to go do what they want to do as far as tourism, or even that afternoon if it's a shorter race. So my goal is for those people always to come across, they're not shattered, they enjoyed their day, they had, they got to do the rolling buffet and experience what's out at the aid stations.
Nice.
They got to take a picture if they were doing like a Disney marathon or whatever they're doing. And that's the goal of what I always try and get that group of people to do. Because if you set your goal on simply finishing, and again, I'm taking some of those really extreme ones out of it because that's a whole different game. But if your goal is just finishing, then I honestly think you want to have the goal of finishing strong. You want to be able to train so you could potentially go another hour, right? And so that you get through and you have a great day out of it.
Right. Not to mention you have to deal with the elements. So it's not just you with your physical capacity and your fitness. You're going to have to deal with the elements, which will take a lot out of you. It's temperature, right? It's the terrain. It's other things. It's how often you can eat and all of those things. So yeah, you need to be prepared. So what we're talking about then, moving a little bit then from base training into endurance rides, it's a little bit, it's a related topic here, but we can treat it as its own topic. So going to that idea of going out on an endurance ride, which we would say it's about 2 to 3 hours long, right? 1 hour ride at 60% of FTP, like Ian said, is not an endurance ride. When you go out on these endurance rides, The recommendation would be for you to not turn that into a very steady state ride that you are at the same cadence, at the same power for the duration. You are going to be benefiting much more if you go on the ride like that and you change your cadence throughout that ride. So let's say you do a couple of hike. If you don't, I'm not telling you to do intervals. You could though. You could do a few intervals in there. I do that all the time, especially in the winter indoors. I have a 2 to 3 hour ride. I have every 20 minutes, I have a block of something happening that I do. Not something that's going to be super intense and kill my legs, but it's maybe a 2x5 or a 15-minute block of something that I do. And then I go another 45 minutes at endurance pace. But if you don't even do that, if you just change your cadence. So sometimes you're at a 60, 70 RPMs, and then later on you're at 90 to 100, and also varying your power a little bit. So it doesn't have to be that steady, let's say 75% or 70% the whole time. Give yourself a range and stay within that range. And then the easiest way to do that, if you don't want to put a lot of thought into it and turn into a workout, is pick a course that has a lot of variation. So if you're doing it indoors in a platform such as Zwift, pick something that has a lot of undulations, it's got some hills, go up the mountain once, come back, etc. Not doing 100% of FTP, but just getting that in there. So you're going to naturally have those ebbs and flows that you're going to use different cadences at different power.
Well, and one of those is, it's actually important. If you think about how we all used to ride back in the Stone Ages before Zwift, we used to go out in group rides. And what did every group ride have? Town line sprints.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. County line sprints, things like that. So you were changing it, even if it wasn't a workout. So you were doing those things that we're talking about. But when you're riding on the trainer, riding inside, or even just riding solo, those things aren't there. So you have to plan them in there. It's kind of like planning your nutrition when you're on the bike. If you just wait till you're thirsty, you might have dug a little too deep. Or if you wait till you're thirsty and you're in a road race or a crit, that may not be the best time to drink because, someone's probably going to attack you when they see that.
Right.
And then why would you not want to do, let's say, 3 hours on a trainer at 70% without changing anything? For one thing, you can get overuse injuries.
Well, repetitive motion injuries, yeah.
Yes. And then, and really, it just doesn't give you, when you go outside, you're never going to ride that steady. Right. You just won't. So it's not good preparation for it.
Well, Ian will in a half Ironman.
No, I won't because I'm passing too many people.
I love it. No, Ian talks about all the time. You need to be able to dig in and use those matches and get to the VO2 level to be able to come by somebody, because you don't want to get held up by someone else's pace. You want to ride the pace that you're looking to. You're going to balance that out. Yep. So even then, because that is a misnomer. People think like they're going to go out and they're going to do their distance and they're going to hold this 200ish whatever watts and that's it. But in fact, it is a little bit more dynamic. And the further down you go, from what I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, as you get towards age groupers and further down, there's actually more things happening. There's people that are like, mixing it up and drafting it. It's almost like a road race from what I can see from the ones that I've seen. You can see it in his face. So with that, I mean, that ends up mixing things up. And I come across people that it's packed. Like you can't get these gaps because there's just so many people,
That's why you learn to pee on the bike.
That's a whole other subject about the commercialization of long course triathlons. But
but I think it's huge. And so going back to the topic here about endurance rides and trying to mix things up, at this time of year, a lot of people are indoors and mixing it up. Like Linda talks about wanting to be her goal this year to be working on cadence. Switching that up and bringing that down, like low. That means you guys have, you've got to be out of a workout. You've got to choose a terrain that's going to really force you down and really work out of the ordinary if you're going to do that. So if in fact we're doing something so out of the ordinary and we're going to be indoors, you really need to kind of exaggerate that and take that opportunity to really put yourself into a situation where your body is forced to change or do something different on the high end of cadence or on the low end of cadence, standing, sitting, and doing the opposite, and those sort of things, and mixing these rides up. We're not asking you to do 40 minutes at 95, 100% of your threshold to get this work done. You can definitely mix it up, and I think that's the idea, and not just to sit at the 65, 70% and just it's flatlined without any spin ups or anything like that. And that's what you'll
Mm-hmm.
see a lot in our workouts. You'll see that every 5 or 10 minutes, whether it be a VO2 spin up, a cadence spin up, a standing spin up, whatever it may be. Mix that up, and I think that's where you're going to find the best of both worlds, the balance.
Right, and that's good for your training, obviously, and it's good for your body because that way you're also changing positions. You're not in the saddle in the same exact position for such a long time. So,
yeah. So I guess going around, what's the longest that we have done these kind of steady state rides around the room here, kind of in this preseason, or what are we prescribing? What are kind of numbers if we're looking at brass tacks that we're giving out to people?
I have been.
I'm sorry, I'm not actually giving out a long steady state ride.
Yeah.
It's gonna have intervals of maybe 10 to 15, depending on if someone's going long course or what they're doing. We're talking intervals of 10 to 15 minutes of probably just above or at race pace, and a little bit of recovery time, and then coming back up and coming back down. Because I don't need anybody riding at race pace intervals for 2 hours, 3 hours. Because again, that's race pace is generally what I would consider your median effort.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I'll give an example of one of our lab participants, Stephanie. So Stephanie, on the weekends, she can train on Saturday, but not Sundays, due to commitments. And so for her, the idea to get both things, which is the intensity work and the endurance pace, she does the, let's say, Saturday lab workout, which is about an hour long. And then she continues on the bike and stays for another hour or so at an endurance pace, which is a range, but really varying her cadence, her power, and
Free riding.
Flowing with the terrain, free riding, right?
Yeah, and I think that's key. And so you're not talking about getting on and slogging it out for 2 hours or some percentage of your race at this part of the season. You're talking about really investing the time to learning the skills to make yourself fast in the long run and to be strong. That's the important part. And to get that arms up doing cartwheels that Ian likes to do. Even when he just walks through the door at the mall. That's just how he walks into the mall. He just has that energy.
Make an entrance, man.
That sort of
doorway
thing.
technique.
Exactly. All right. So, Teo, you want to do our last topic from the forum?
Yes. So the other thing that we're talking about this week is using maple syrup as a very good fuel for workouts. And we're talking about pure maple syrup, 100% maple syrup, nothing else. And pretty simple, straightforward. But the good thing about it is it's got low glycemic index. It's got minerals in there. And it gives you that energy that it's quickly absorbed by the body, and it gives you that energy that you need. So you could use it a couple different ways. You could use it before an intense workout. You could use it during it if you need a little boost. So instead of a gel, which will have so many things into it, I mean, a lot of these gels have a lot of garbage, and they're very quick, right? They're high glycemic index, and so they give you that quick boost and then a quick shot of energy. The maple syrup is more sustainable. And it's great too if you are the kind of rider who rides really early in the morning and you can't stomach anything before you get on a bike. So let's say you had the carbs the night before, so you wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning to get on a bike. That maple syrup is a great help for you for an intense workout.
Now, I do have to qualify this. If you're a Super Troopers fan, this is not where you grab the entire bottle of syrup and chug it down, right? That's not what we're talking about here.
Nice.
Yeah,
and I think ingredients is key.
100 calories.
That's right. I think ingredients is key. You got to turn the label over. You got to make sure it's the real stuff. I think the biggest thing that we're looking for is we're not looking for what's called high fructose corn syrup. Essentially, that's what's going to give you a huge spike, similar to what Teo was talking about on the end of kind of gels and things like that. So we're looking for a more sustained release. Thing about maple syrup, it is very versatile. You can put it in water and get the right percentage carbohydrate solution to get absorbed in your body. You can use it as a gel. So there's different ways and times you can use it. Again, during your non-steady state, endurance rides, you can practice your fueling and see how you do on, minimal fueling. the horror it feels, but like in the dark dungeons of pain caves, you've got people that are taking gels every 20 minutes on their endurance ride for 2.5 hours. And like, you can imagine how, your gut and how people feel after that. And they were doing 70% for 2 hours. So mixing it up, using alternatives, we are all advocates of Whole Foods, and not Whole Foods the store, just Whole Foods in general. But we do enjoy the store. But with that, I mean, we've all had experience with it. I'm a big hydration guy, and I use it for that. And it's a simple go-to, not having to, when we're out and we're doing products like the Scratch, the Noon. You like to have that because you can carry it. I can't. Well, I guess you could carry bottles of maple syrup in your back pocket, but having that, on the go, those powders can work on a quick thing. But on every day, I've got 2 or 3 bottles at home. It's easy to carry, and it's nice.
Yeah, and if you go to these outdoor stores like REI, etc., they have little pouches.
Yeah,
that are refillable that you can use.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm looking right now. So I'm back.
Don't go to REI for those. No, seriously, and here's why.
Yeah, you can use this stuff from home.
REI is a great store. I love REI. But what I will tell you is there's also, if you go to Walmart or grocery store, go to the aisle where they do baby foods.
Yeah, that's a good one.
There's a lot of people who make their own baby foods and applesauce type things, and you can get the little pouches there.
Oh.
Big box of them, like a box of 100 of them, way cheaper than you can buy like.
Oh, no kidding.
Are you talking about emptying those out and refilling them? Ian, or do you talk refillable ones?
You can get them
refillable,
empty.
Gotcha.
Well, and you can get them empty, and so what I have is actually, because I was using Genucan for a while, and I'd mix it up, a batch of it, and I'd fill 2 or 3 of the pouches.
Gotcha.
And I have like a little, it's not really a syringe, but it's a little thing you'd screw on top, plunge it in there, squeeze it in, unscrew it.
Yeah.
So I'm looking online right now. So a number of places. I don't want to endorse anybody, but Honey Stinger's got a gel flask 1, and it's $2.39.
Yeah,
right.
And you can easily fill that up with some USDA grade AAA Vermont maple syrup.
Dark, whatever.
Yeah,
amber or whatever. But we're talking Vermont. We're not talking Canadian.
Oh man, Christopher O'Hearn on the live stream here is talking about he likes his regular food to be homemade waffles dripped with maple syrup and dried banana pieces. I want to go on a ride with Chris. Waffles and maple syrup. That sounds great.
Yeah, Jason provided me some like egg rice.
Yeah,
which are great, but no waffles and
I know.
Syrup.
Sorry,
this
no
is an
waffles.
interesting question here too. Is maple sugar? So, living here in Michigan and going to Canada a lot, right? Have you guys ever seen the little maple shaped sugar candies that are
interesting? Mm-hmm. No, okay.
So they basically they crystallize the syrup and they turn it into a candy, which is actually fascinating to think about because it's such an easy way to deliver it. I'm just not sure if the properties are the same.
Yeah, we'll have to take a look. And he says you're going to have to go on the other side of the northern wall.
Avoid the night walkers.
Exactly. But Vermont maple syrup, Linda says that's the way to go. So,
yeah, but don't trust her because she likes to put really crazy videos and songs up that will make you want to just chop your brain out.
There you go. This is what happens in the pain caves during the season, though. You got to find a way to make it and get through. So that's I did jump into a couple of their workouts. It's pretty lively in there, in the channels. So, all right. So with that, a versatile tool that you can use on your next ride out, your training ride. There's a bunch of recipes. There's been some talks on the Endurance Lab from Ted Stewart. I know he's new to it. Being able to use that as a post-workout after 1 hour at the end of the day. He's had some really good success. He could probably share some stories on that, and that's something brand new. And he had never thought of it before. He was doing some other things, some things with some pretty high carbohydrate sources like Gatorade and that sort of thing. So maybe after a couple of weeks, we can reach out and kind of see what the lab riders think after they get a chance to use some of these ideas.
What about alternatives if somebody absolutely despises the taste of maple syrup?
Right. Yeah.
You got agave.
Yeah. So both are good. Option. Yeah, and I think you just got to be careful with how you listen to things in the media with using any of these. Actually, agave in particular has got some dark shadows, but you know what? You got to think of what we're using it for. We're using it to fuel our endurance ride. We're not making it so that, we're better non-diabetics. We're, that sort of thing. We're using it for a purpose. We're not drinking it all throughout the day, although, maybe Mitch likes to take shots, throughout the day. That could be a thing, but we're using it for a very specific thing, fueling the specific workout or a need. So that's important to understand.
I was thinking of doing maple syrup shots today in my workouts
There
because
you
I'm
go.
home on a snow day. So
there you go. Kyle.
So, really quick, the definition of a snow day in the DC area is kind of a joke. He's got like 4 or 5 inches of snow.
Yeah.
And it's a snow day. So I just
hey, Mitch, I get to work out during the day today, so shut up.
Right. It's my rest day today, so
yeah.
I'm all good.
Yeah, Carrie does mention that agave is high fructose, so be careful of that. And the reason why we are careful of that is because of the spike that you're going to get, about the response you're going to get, and that's what Taya had spoke about. Kind of the long release, slower release is what we're talking about. So definitely take that to advantage. But honey is a good one, and I think if you do okay with fructose, I think that's good. So kind of the way to think about it is agave would be kind of your higher fruit end or fructose end. You've got honey that has a combination of the two, fructose and sucrose, and then maple syrup, which is just sucrose, which is just the sugars. That's dextrose and I'm blanking on the second part, but it doesn't have fructose in it, and so that would be kind of like the stratified way to look at it if you're looking at sugars. So excellent. So with that, we can slide on over to this week in our lab and looks like we're rounding up the transition lab, and we've got a couple things. I'll throw it over to Ian to talk about the final week of our exercises, and then I'll throw it over back to Taya to talk a little bit about the actual skills that we're working on in the lab for this final week of the transition lab.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So we're back to our combination exercises workout, except this one, unlike the previous week, is involving your legs. So it's gonna give you a good little burn at the early part of the week. The good thing about this one is very similar to last time. You're just gonna be adding a few other things. And again, the key to this is being constant motion and using good form.
Right.
So if you can't do 6 pull-ups straight, that's okay. Do 1, drop, get back on, do another one, drop, or use the pull-up machine that a lot of gyms have, or you can use an elastic band. Or even if you can't do any of that, you don't have access, but you do have access to a bar, jump up and then negative it down slowly. Release, shake out the arms, jump up, and do that again. And then your ankles to the bar, there's some different ways you can do it. I like to do the complete roll-up. You can hang and just lift your legs. The important part is engaging your core. Now, when I say engaging your core in this one, it's not just your stomach. It's not just your abs. You are actually going to engage your upper glutes and your lower back. Because what you want to do is bring everything up and bring it down slowly. You don't want to be doing the swinging thing because then you're not really working anything and you just look silly. And you're probably going to fall. Which, if you're going to do that, please record it. It's good for like probably 1,000 or 2,000 YouTube hits. But no, so try not to do those kind of things. And then when you're going into the push-ups, again, it says it's 25 push-ups. Go to your knees if you have to. Take the break if you have to. But the idea is good form and then as continuous motion as possible. And so when I say that continuous motion, again, I say take a break if you need to. But when you transition from the push-up to the mountain climbers, there shouldn't be a 2 or 3 minute break. It's as soon as you get done with the 25 push-ups, you go straight into the mountain climbers and then straight into the reverse lunge squats, because that's the idea, is that muscle endurance. As we go further into the week, we have our full body Tabatas. Those are also, again, designed for, it's going to hit a different muscle group or a different focus throughout that cycle, and you go through it. So you're going to get a little rest per major muscle group while you're doing another major muscle group, but you're not going to get a full rest until you're through with that cycle. So that's the important part of those. And then when you're using your weights on this one, I have some recommended weights in there, but again, that's just recommended. Everyone's going to be different. You know, if you're Jason, you might be using the 65-pound dumbbells or kettlebells. If you're Mitch, you might be using a can of peas. You know, you have to mix it up and do what's right for you. But seriously, regarding can of peas or a gallon of milk, those things in your house actually work really well. So if you don't have 2-pound weights and that's what you want to use, seriously, grab some canned food, or you can grab a bag of rice or things like that. If you have 5-pound bags of rice, which I'm sure Jason does at his house, and I know Mitch does too.
We go all the way up to 50, yeah.
We're surprisingly not the biggest rice eaters, but
yeah. There's got to be something on that bench that Mitch can lift back there.
Exactly. There's probably something he can lift. Maybe that squirt bottle.
But we won't tell the product.
There you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
You can pick something that's got a weight that works for you.
Man.
when I lived in Haiti, we were using the water jugs.
Nice.
That was a great way to do some workouts. So you can do these at home and get that same benefit. And then continuing on through that, you're going to have the different core focused Tabata exercises in there. Anything you're doing that's bent over that you see in there, the idea is you have a flat back. Mm-hmm. You're bending at your waist. You're hinging. You're not rounding, right? So you do this, not that. So you only go down as far as you can go. So those are the big things as we're going through the rest of this week. This is your last week of this. And by now, most of these exercises should be getting fairly easy for you, or at least not disastrously painful.
And Ian, remind us what can people do if they don't have the pull-up bars? Is there something they can use instead of that?
Yeah, go ahead, Mitch.
Oh no, I'm sorry, guys. I got to take off. I apologize, and I'll talk to you guys later.
All right.
Yeah. So if you have access to any kind of elastic bands, that's great. Those actually work just as good. If you have TRX bands, you can use those. But worst case scenario, if you have nothing, you can actually use a door frame. You can grab on the edge and pull yourself up. You can anything that has a pull and that you can angle yourself. That is more of a downward pull, vice a straight lateral pull. You want to. That's what you can do. So anything you can do this with will work, and that'll hit some of the same muscles. And again, we're not trying to create people with the world's largest back. All we're trying to do is kind of round things out for you. So you're engaging your different muscle groups. So you're more of a balanced, stable muscular system in your body. Because if you're only working push and you don't work pull, then you have a tendency to round at the shoulders. And if you're only working pull and not push, you're not going to be able to support yourself on the bike when you're in the latter part of a race. If you're not working your full core system, you're going to fall apart on the run, and you're going to be a disaster in the water. So those are the different kind of things we're trying to do. And again, it's all about balance. There's definitely, you're not going to walk out of this with giant arms. You might walk out with a six-pack, but no giant arms.
Speaking of six-pack, I recorded a video showing over 10 plank variations from beginners to more advanced. So that's going to be, I just need to do some narration for that, and that's going to be going up in our YouTube channel pretty soon here.
Oh, definitely good. And then as far as skills in this last week, Taya?
Yeah, so this last week of the Transition Lab, we worked on some sweet spot variation workout where we are using the cadence changes and also body position changes to show you how you can slow down without using your brakes. So you go from high speed, high cadence into standing low cadence to do that. So you're training several systems there. We had a skills and torque workout really designed to develop and improve torque by challenging you to change between high and low cadence quickly. So it's one of those workouts that the stress score, if you look at the TSS for the workout, it isn't high, but once you walk out of that workout, your legs are going to be feeling a little bit like jelly because you're working all kinds of different muscles, hamstrings, etc. And then the last one for the week was a longer sweet spot workout, working at the 85% range up and down, and building that up because we're going to be transitioning into more of that work in the upcoming lab, which is coming up in about a week.
Right. So when we're talking about kind of not working in this low steady state, we are looking to work in this more sweet spot zone, kind of this 80% range and kind of in this, and that's what we're working towards for those riders to get the most out of their workouts. And that's what we've been building on as far as skills are concerned. So really important to kind of get an idea of where that's at. And so Taya does allude a little bit to the preseason lab, and essentially this is the lab that we're looking at as you prepare yourself for the bigger work that you'll be doing as you build power, performance. These are the levels that we're using as we move forward, just to understand how, as you get closer to your goal race, as you reach your goal fitness and that sort of thing. So this is essentially for the athlete who has finished, let's say, your outdoor season, and you're focusing on essentially the fundamental abilities to do things like endurance, force, and speed skills, and providing that foundation that you can accomplish different things when you go into those higher intensities as your season progresses. And so as we increase the volume steadily, you want to boost your aerobic endurance and prepare the body essentially for larger and more intense workouts later on. And as the months and hopefully with the labs proceed, as you join us on this journey through the year.
Yeah, and going back to what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, and if you joined us late, you can go back and listen to the beginning where we talk about why the base training isn't the best plan for you. So along those lines, this next lab provides what you actually need at this time of the year.
Right. And then one announcement before we go for next week, Ian, we have a special guest, right?
We do. We have a special guest coming on. It's Dr. Brad. He's a world famous podiatrist. He's worked on the medical staff at Kona. He's raced it too. He's pretty much well known in the Florida Keys as the guy if you have any foot issues. He's helped probably thousands, if not more, of people overcome issues that they've had with running and cycling from their feet problems. And as you can imagine, in the Florida Keys, people do all kinds of things to their feet. Yeah. Whether they're drunk, stumbling into things and break stuff, working on boats with bare feet and dropping things on them. Ooh, so he's got a wealth of experience and knowledge. So he's going to share some of that with us and how he goes about making shoe recommendations to people. And based on personal experience with him with my wife, I can definitely say his shoe recommendations are pretty sound.
Yeah, that's great. I think
so. Looking forward to getting him on next week.
Yeah, so if you guys, listeners out there, have questions, definitely post in the forum. We'll post a link to that. And if you want to send pictures of your feet to Ian at endurancelab.fit, and he'll take a look at those. We'll make sure we get those over to Dr. Brad as well. So, was there anything else, Taya, from your side?
Yeah, if you have an X-ray, even better.
yeah, I guess that would be most appropriate. I guess
make a diagnosis. That's right.
Something. We aren't professionals, but we play them here on the podcast. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today here in the Coach's Corner. And if it's your first time listening and would like to hear more content from the Endurance Lab, head over to your favorite podcast app and search the Endurance Lab, or head to YouTube and search the same. And don't forget to click subscribe. For more information on when the next lab is, head over to endurancelab.fit to learn where you can join us to train smart and get results. We'll see everybody next week.